Welcome back to Bringing Home the W. I'm Tanya Casole-Gouveia, and along with my co-host, Josh McConnell, we're pulling back the curtain and bringing you into the building of the WNBA Toronto team identity. Today, we're diving deeper into sports design, but going beyond the logo. What makes it go from an icon to iconic? And we've tapped into an expert who will actually be helping to guide the WNBA Toronto design team, a footwear designer who spent 10 years with Nike Air Jordan brand. He's the founder and president of Pensole Lewis College of Business and Design. Please welcome Dr. Dwayne Edwards.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And I know we've got a lot of sneakerheads listening, and you did design some Jordans. So I just want to know, do you have a favorite Jordan?
Oh, yeah, easy. Air Jordan 3.
The threes. The threes.
Easy. I didn't design it. Tinker did. That's my favorite J. Easily.
Can you let our listeners know which J's you designed?
So I worked on, so when you're designing for a major company, you are the lead designer on a project, and then you work on other projects, right? So there's always a lead, but in Jordan, we always contributed as a team. So I worked on 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. I was lead on, and 23. And then all of Melo's first 8 shoes, a couple of Derek Jeter shoes, Roy Jones Jr., that's the Jordan side. Yeah. And then other like team shoes and things that we did on Jordan brand. But it was fun. Stressful, but it was fun.
Yeah, I bet. Because, well, I was reading that's how you sort of built the original idea for Pensole Academy before it became the college, was putting students through like that 2-week. We have to build a design for a shoe, so putting students through that. So it's interesting that the academy, then the college, came out of that actual real world.
Yeah, I think what people think sometimes is, you sit all day and draw shoes when you work at a footwear company. That's not true. Especially the higher you get, the less design you actually do. But at Nike, on the calendar, it says 6 weeks. You have 6 weeks to create something, but in real time, it's actually 2. And so you have to have a solid design process to keep up with the pace and the rigor that exists. And so what we did was, when I left and I created my academy, I wanted to put the students through exactly what it felt like to design something from zero to a finished idea in 2 weeks. And so that meant, pretty much they're working 14 to 16 hours every day straight through. So my goal was for them to either quit or absolutely love it, like no middle.
What is it, just out of curiosity, like what is it about shoes? And obviously we're going to get into the team and the logos, but what is it about shoes that you think resonates?
A few things, man. I mean, I started drawing shoes when I was 12, and that was in 81. And I've been designing shoes for 35 years. I think for me, it goes back to when I was in high school, man. That was my mode of transportation before I had a car. So like that was one, that was the way, that was your mobility. 2, when you work in, or when you're in an environment where sneakers are important, people look from the feet up, right? So like you can have a nice fresh pair of J's and some busted jeans on and an old t-shirt, you get a pass. Like as long as the sneakers are straight, like everything else you have on, the rest of the fit doesn't even matter. Like you could pretty much just be in pajamas and be good. So footwear is just one of those personal self-expression things that I would say after t-shirts, because t-shirts really started self-expression for creatively from a graphic perspective, because you have more real estate on the t-shirt side. But footwear was really the main vehicle that really started the storytell.
Obviously now we've let our listeners know that you've got that pedigree. Talking specifically about this WNBA Toronto team, when designing a logo, what are some of the most important factors from your perspective that should be considered?
That's a big-ended question. Like there's a lot of factors in there. I think one, you have to decide or understand what is it going to be placed on? Like, how is it going to be displayed? Is it on product? If it's on footwear, because you have less real estate, it has to be more iconic and visually expressive in a small form from a long distance. But the beauty of it is if you can understand branding through the lens of small and big, then if it works both ways, then you know you're in the right spot. What is the storytelling you want it to communicate? Because the beauty of graphics, it tells stories without someone telling the story for you. Visually, it speaks to you.
I read somewhere too that part of the thought is logos that have to be embroidered, frankly, and small enough that you don't lose the detail.
Yeah, that's a part of the scaling. If it has too small of fonts or letters, embroidery is not a good application. That's why it would need to be scaled into a bigger form. But yeah, absolutely. If the application of the product is directly connected to what is going to go on from an object point of view, but absolutely, yep. But embroidery is probably the simplest test to see if it works because it's the one that's the least forgiving.
You know, you always hear keep it simple, stupid, the KISS thing. So is that sort of one of the hallmarks of logo design, keeping it simple, like a child could draw it or something like that? Or
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because in some cases, a child would have to identify what it is, and you would want them to be able to identify it and remember it through association, right? And that's what also you want to do is make it simple enough, and whether it's through shape or color. Like there are some brands that you know the brand by color, and some brands actually register their color as a part of their branding. So like a Tiffany or a Cartier, they've done a great job of looking at branding through the lens of color, and then they support it with the font that they use and then the other graphics that they use. So branding is not just a logo. You should also consider color if it's a part of what you want people to remember you by. And if you can customize your own color like Tiffany has and like Cartier has, or some of the other entities have, then you hit both levers.
oh, so this is like the physiological science of like a sort of a neuroscience.
You see color first, then you see shape.
That's why it's the golden arches.
Correct. That are similar in reference to fries.
Ah, the method to the madness.
Yes. Yeah.
That's actually a good segue that, when it comes to iconic logos, like what makes them iconic? We think of the Golden Arches as a great example from Tanya, but what are other ways that we could do that?
We touched on it earlier, simplicity and repetition. And that is through branding consistency, right? So that's the other element. If there were rules for branding, once you settle on what that branding is, then you have to be consistent with that branding and having real defined guidelines that if you're doing anything with that brand and if you're giving it to someone else as an outside party to do something with, they follow the same guidelines. If you have a brand and you have multiple branding associated with it, it's difficult for people to follow along with what you want to be identified with your brand. So that branding and consistency of brand is critical to the success of it being memorable. And so McDonald's or Apple or Nike, they've done a great job of visual consistency. It hasn't changed. There is more to branding than just creating the logo. Like I said, there's the repetition, what your product stands for, and them connecting the dots between what you've created and your brand and what that represents and stands for. All that matters, and it's staying in your mind space in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And taking out the things that aren't necessary. So even when I think of the NBA logo, right, the silhouette, the W logo, the silhouette, even you mentioned the Jordan 3s, that's when the Jumpman was used for the first time. So it's like that iconic silhouette that you know who that is. Yeah,
and sometimes logos, I mean, I think what's cool about it is if you're into branding, is really cool to understand the history of where the logos came from. Mm-hmm. Like the swoosh, it cost Nike $35. This teacher at Portland State University, a graphics teacher at Portland State University, knocked it out for $35. Now, Phil Knight took care of her later on with some shares, and she's good now. But $35 for that logo, like arguably, that's probably the most iconic logo next to Coca-Cola's logo font ever created, right? The Jumpman was a photograph.
Yeah.
It wasn't even drawn. It was taken from a photo shoot. It doesn't always have to be created physically by you. It could be a visual representation that you reinterpret.
Now, using your experience, I'm curious, if we bring it back down to the WNBA Toronto team, when they're thinking about this logo and you're part of that, you're going to be a sort of a guide for that design team. We want to know sort of, how does a logo anchor the broader identity, the values of a team?
Well, one is the name. Like you have to have a name that's relevant, right? So if the name doesn't resonate with the fan base, then it won't, no matter what the hell you create from a logo perspective, it ain't going to work.
I guess that's the first step is the team name. So we're not there yet, but
yes, you got to get a name right first. But again, for sports, it's together. You have to hit the home run together, because you want to be able to have a name that people are proud to call themselves. And I think the beauty of today, you can get more socially conscious. If you look at the new, like the WNBA names, because those are the newer franchises from a sports perspective, they're more socially relevant and more lifestyle relevant. They're more geography relevant. And so I think that's the beauty of being a part of this process, is you get to create something with the people of Canada, not just Toronto. Being able to engage the people of Canada, this is for you. And that's what I love about this process. It's inclusive to the fans and the people.
Totally. And then there was, I think Josh can speak to it a little bit better, but over, 10,000 submissions to sift through.
And then there's the other layer of like factoring in the logo and the design with the name. And I guess I'm curious, what is it that makes a logo iconic in the sense of a lifestyle brand, for example? So I'm just thinking, like, people will wear Yankees hats, and just because it's a thing, or sneakers again, is just such a cultural thing. Basketball is kind of this unique sport where really it's turned into also a lifestyle when it comes to its swagger and logos and jerseys. So how does WNBA Toronto try to capture all of that magic and bottle it up a little?
I think the collision of the moment is perfect, because the WNBA is experiencing an amazing moment right now that I think is a movement, not a moment. And I think within that, though, the lifestyle element of the WNBA is growing just as, I would say, bigger than the men's runway. But being able to see them before the game and after the game, I think elevates this idea of what they want to represent themselves on and off the court. And so being able to do that and create branding that lives on and off the court, that does not feel forced, right? Like, it doesn't look cool to have like a Lakers on a jean jacket. Like that logo doesn't work, right? But even like some of the newer NBA teams, like the Brooklyn Nets, if you notice their branding, they celebrate Brooklyn, not the Nets part, right? Because they know the Brooklyn part is the part that's the more culturally relevant part of that name, not the Nets part. So they inherited the Nets part, and then they created the Brooklyn part. And so that's where that interesting marriage kind of comes to life. But I think with the Toronto WNBA opportunity, I think it's a perfect opportunity to blend these two worlds together. And I can see it in multiple ways, both as a font strategy, because the font is going to be very critical, as well as the visual iconic mark that does exist that will live on jerseys. And that's the beauty of designing branding. From a jersey perspective, you have more real estate. So you can tell more of the complete logo story from the jersey perspective.
And that, the fans will actually be excited to wear, right? And,
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And people love being part of a team, right? So just being able to be on that WNBA Toronto team by wearing your colors, I know people are just excited for that. So we got to get this process going, I guess.
And we got to get it right.
And we got to get exactly.
There's a lot at stake, but I think what the beauty for me is I think the process of how we're getting there is going to set the tone for how new franchises create branding and strategies by opening the door to the community. But I think is also going to set the bar, right? And being able to, I'd rather be in the position to set the bar than follow the bar.
So being a leader in the space.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think the process is a part of the story. And that's what, obviously we're doing here, but I think that's the piece that's going to be a part of the reveal is sharing the story of how we got here. And so a part of branding is storytelling. A part of storytelling is emotional connection. And a part of emotional connection breeds brand loyalty. Brand loyalty breeds consumerism and endorsement and pride.
Yeah, because the consumer in the end kind of decides.
Oh, 100%.
If it's good or not, right?
100%. The consumer always, no matter how much research these brands do on their product, the consumer will if they love the product, they will decide what they want to do with the product and wear it the way they want to wear it and talk about it the way they want to talk about it. A good example of that is the Air Jordan 3 as an example, right? Where even though we called it elephant print, right? It technically, elephant doesn't look like that. And that was just the name of the leather swatch, right? But we condition the consumer to tell stories through our product.
Kind of sounds like this process that, it's always evolving. Like the product creation process is evolving. Would you say that's true?
Oh, always. Yeah. Yeah. And I think even with this, I say process, you say I say process, you say process. But even with this process, I think even the emergence of the city edition jerseys, right? That allows you to create a brand identity and then the offshoots of additional storytelling opportunities associated with it, where it allows you to tell more consumer engagement opportunities with the branding. So it allows the consumer to continue the conversation once we've introduced it.
To that point, there's also, when we talked to Khalid from Metal a few episodes back, he was for the nameyourteam.ca, I submitted the Toronto Towers.
Okay.
Spoiler alert, is not the Toronto Towers. But he was like, the CN Tower was of a different moment with designing for the future, basically, and keeping even the different platforms in mind. Like, how much of a challenge is that for a designer like yourself when you're thinking, okay, this has to stand, how do you make a logo stand the test of time?
Well, the logo could stand the test of time. The name of it may not be able to your point. But that's all the things you have to take into consideration for something like a franchise, an NBA franchise, because you're trying to select a name that will never change. Mm-hmm. That's different than creating a logo or a brand for a product, right? Now, the logo can change, and the logos have changed for some teams. The logo, like even the Raptors have changed their logos from the original, but the name has stayed the same. Mm-hmm. So you're right. This opportunity is not just creating a branding, it's creating an identity first through name, and then a graphic and a logo and a brand that supports that name. So that's actually technically probably the hardest part in the equation is being able to get down to a name that could live for decades. And it's very rare if any sports industry or league does a team name change. The only time it changes is when it leaves a city and relocates. And in most of those instances, it still stays the same, like the Lakers or the Utah Jazz.
That also makes me curious about, with the technology and how quickly technology moves, how has your design changed? I guess it's maybe gotten easier with different computer systems with your daily design process.
Yeah, I'm old school though. I still use a paper and pencil. To me, like if you can't draw with a paper and pencil, you're not really an artist or a designer. That's just my opinion. I mean, I equate it to a rapper and an MC. An MC doesn't need a beat. A rapper just needs a microphone, right? And so if you're, to me, if you're a designer, I'm gonna give you a piece of paper and a pencil. We're gonna go. But if you need a computer and software, like, oh, like you really can't get down naturally. And so for me, like you should be able to draw that logo out. Like that's the level of simplicity it should have.
So what I'm hearing is in order to make a logo go from an icon to iconic, we have to think about being a leader, being authentic, and in the end, it's the consumer who's in charge.
Yeah, I would add the storytelling in there because the storytelling creates the emotional connection to the target consumer you're trying to appeal to. So within the name and within the design, storytelling is going to be a part of that process for sure. And then that is what makes it iconic, is because it resonates with the consumer enough to where it becomes a test of time. And then hopefully it becomes generational, right? I think for me, I think one of the entities that's probably done, I think one of the best jobs of brainwashing and simplicity is Disney. Their logo is 3 damn circles. Like it's literally 3 damn circles.
I still can't draw it though.
It's 3 circles, man. And so they've done such a good job of brainwashing you consistently with those 3 damn circles, where it started off as Mickey Mouse as a full character. Now they've simplified to 3 damn circles. So much so when you go to a Disneyland or Disney World, like your food comes in 3 circles. They have 3 circles in carpet. They have 3 circles in the drapes. They have 3 circles all over the park. So they turned it into finding hidden Mickeys. And so that creates the further brainwashing of the logo by they made it interactive and fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like 3 octagons, but I mean, I get the point. And that's the main thing. I was kind of like to touch on one thing. You were talking about, the idea of timelessness and so on. But, the Raptors just recently announced, it's 30th anniversary, purple's back. And they kind of led with this idea of you want purple, you've got it. And they actually put that in their social media and their assets and so on. How does this whole idea of nostalgia come into play?
See, I think what's really cool about that is part of the branding strategy, as I mentioned earlier, is color. There was only one other team in the league that had purple, and they rarely used it, right? And so the Raptors, and that was the Jazz. That was the Raptors. Then the Pelicans, which was where the Jazz used to be. They added purple later, but that's a strategic play, right? And so they leveraged that because they leveraged purple more than Utah did, but Utah was the first one with purple. And so that became a part of their branding, is having the purple lead in that equation. So that's why they created that campaign of, hey, you want purple, and now it's back, because that was the iconic, the thing that you remembered from those jerseys was the purple jersey with the big Raptor graphic. That whole retro thing, it comes around and comes around. It comes around and disappears. It comes around and disappears. And so they were able to leverage that anniversary moment to be able to reintroduce even these fans who are not 35 years old to what the Raptors used to look like. So now they created another extension of selling more jerseys. So you got to remember, at the end of the day, that's the goal, right? You want to sell merch and product. So being able to bring that back allows a further extension of having now 3 or 4 Raptors jerseys in your closet versus just having the latest one that's in black and red.
And I guess that's where it comes back to the idea of being bold and being the leader at the start and kind of staking your claim, because then, down the track, you don't know if it's going to work now, but later on it very well could, and bring in the dollars.
All the way through down to, you got to think about this when you think about NBA uniforms. There's a font that the team name says, right? But most of the time, the numbers are basic and boring and don't match the name font. The Raptors, it was the whole thing. Like the numbers are also the same font as the Raptors name. So they carry the detail all the way through to the numbers. But most of the time, the number is ignored in that equation. And so whoever created that brand, they just had fun with the overall visual. So they didn't leave any stone unturned, which also makes it more iconic because if you just saw the back of the Raptors jersey, you knew it was the Raptors because the font is iconically different than any other jersey in the league. So that's another element of branding and storytelling that they carried all the way through.
When you mentioned all the different types of jerseys you can have in your closet, like throwbacks and things of that nature, it makes me think of collabs, brand collaborations and partnerships. So I'm wondering, how does the WNBA Toronto team make itself more enticing or available to potential partnerships or collabs?
See, I think the Drake and Raptors collab was, well, first of all, it was authentic. Like, Drake is from there. Like, it made sense. Like, it wasn't forced. I'm pretty sure the Raptors will not do a Kendrick Lamar collab. So I don't think that'll happen. So that wouldn't make any sense, right? But
too soon.
Yeah, it's a little stain right now. But that would not have made sense for the Raptors to do that. And so, give them credit that they were authentically grounded in who represents Canada authentically in that lifestyle space. And I couldn't think of too many other people who occupies that brain space. And so it actually worked really organically. And OVO gave the Raptors a license to move into this lifestyle space and then basically hang out with Drake and all of his 30-something million followers. That's a good move. Like that's a great move. And so that has spanned outside of Canada as well. But authentically, it was grounded in Canada. And it made the people in the U.S. who were Drake fans now fans of the Raptors and Drake. So that's when collaboration happens in an authentic way and done right.
So this is Canada's team.
Yes.
And you're an expert in your field, but you're not Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're given this short list of names, what sort of feeling are you looking for, or how will you know which one is the one?
I'm asking why a lot. Because it's an advantage to have me look at it because I have no preconceived history of anything Canada. And so I'm asking to understand. And so if you help me understand, it's going to be a layup for Canadians and it's going to be a layup for Americans because you've thought it through where it has an authentic lens put on it. And so I'm constantly going to ask and have been asking why. Why these colors? Where'd they come from? Why this name? Why this graphic? Like, you have to convince me of why in a factual way, because I don't like opinions. Everyone has an opinion. And so if it can't be supported through a fact, I'm going to keep challenging it until a fact supports the decisions. And to me, like, that's when good design becomes great design, is because only a fool argues a fact. And you may have a color and someone is like, oh, that's not my favorite color. Well, it wasn't for you, but this was why the color was selected. They have to respect it or not, right? But if you can create in facts, then you're much better off to having something that could be accepted in a broader sense than just having an opinion of why you did something, whether it's name, color, or image.
And from all the conversations we've had up to this point, the why really is the most important part we've been hearing, because no matter what, whatever you put out, someone's going to have something to say about it.
Of course,
right?
Yeah. And you gotta be ready to live with that, though. Like, that's the beauty, that's the gift and the curse of the time we live in now, is somebody's going to have an opinion on it. And there's a high probability it won't be good. But I think the beauty of being in a position of leadership and the beauty of being in a position of having an answer to the why and the reason why you did everything, sometimes you have to understand it takes time for people to elevate up to where you are. And you have to be comfortable with not being able to have people where you are. And in some cases, quite honestly, you don't want the majority where you are. You want them to digest and understand and come a bit later. Because in my opinion, and we did this in Jordan all the time, is whenever we created an Air Jordan, we created the Air Jordan with the idea of you not liking it the first time you saw it. Because our thinking was, if you liked it the first time you saw it, we didn't challenge your consciousness of new. Because when we see something for the first time, as humans, we have to equate it to something so it makes sense to us. And so if you see something for the first time from a Jordan perspective, you can't equate it to something, then that means we're on the right page, because we're challenging your consciousness of good and bad. You have to be okay with the decisions you made were supported by facts, and it comes from the people. You have to be okay with someone saying, I don't like this name, and then they go buy 4 T-shirts. So it's like, because they're gonna complain about it regardless. So just be prepared for it. But they're gonna warm up to the idea because repetition comes into play. Visual repetition comes in,
and then they'll warm up to it. And I really like that perspective, and I feel like it's sort of your ethos, because if you make something people have seen before, they'll probably like it, but we're not trying to be something that you've seen before or something that's been done before.
Come on, 35 years ago, I don't know if dinosaurs were in Toronto. I'm assuming they were everywhere, but I'm not sure they were only in Toronto. So I'm pretty sure 35 years ago, people were like, the Raptors? What? Like, that doesn't make sense. And now everyone loves the Raptors.
We sure do. And everyone's going to love this WNBA Toronto team.
Yes, exactly. And even if you don't love the name, you still got jerseys, caps, and T-shirts in your closet. So while you're complaining about, I don't like the name of the Raptors, you have it on your chest. That's why it's important for you to have a process that you follow that gives you the confidence to create. And when you release it to the world, you know you did it with purpose and meaning. And you have an answer as to why, multiple answers to why, and then let the results come the way they come.
And that's how you build community, right? Responding to all the questions and keeping those conversations going on all platforms.
But yeah, just make sure they understand it comes from the right place. And yeah, you don't like everything the first time you see it.
All right, Dr. Edwards, thank you so much for taking the time. I feel like we've gotten a lot more clear on what makes a logo iconic. And I mean, you are a legend in your field, and so you know a thing or two about what it means to be iconic. So thank you once again. We're so looking forward to getting this team named and this brand universe built.
I look forward to buying my cap, T-shirt, and jersey and wearing it proudly. Yes.